Well, zoink, Scoob. Me, you, Shaggy, JD Vance, and the rest of the gang all think there's a mystery afoot. He's not a politician. He's just a regular guy like me and you. So here's where I'm at. Come on, get your tinfoil hats out. If you aren't gonna vote Republican quite yet, well, come on. I'm just like you, your uncle at the bar in the local town, and everyone else. Something's goofy. Boy, I wish somebody could do something about it. If you didn't see, JD Vance this week was on the Joe Rogan Experience, and he takes the platform on one of the biggest positions of the world to exclaim how, I really do think there's a bigger conspiracy there with the Epstein thing. Sure wish somebody could do something about it.
Here is not like anything that's in the files or not in the files.
No, I think there's a lot of telling stuff in the files. I don't really care what's not in the files. The files, what's in it does matter.
The problem is, if you go back to the original investigation, it was designed in a way that was way too narrow. If there was a broader conspiracy, and my view is that there probably was, the evidence that existed in 2007, that was the opportunity to get
So
it.
when you say there probably was a broader conspiracy, what exactly are you saying?
I think there are a few different options. I mean, look, man, I like you and I could literally do 2 episodes about this. I've gone on down to every rabbit hole. There's this funny New York Times story that's somewhat true, somewhat false, but where Susie Wiles, the White House chief of staff, says, well, we know JD's a conspiracy theorist on this. Like, I am, actually. I've gone down every rabbit hole here. Look, so there's the theory that whether it was American intel or foreign intel, that Epstein was sort of using sort of the sex ring to blackmail rich and powerful people. There's that piece of it.
Yeah. That's kind of a big piece of it. That comes from JRE episode 2526, just recently came out just this past week. And again, there's something going on there. I just wish somebody could do something about it. He takes it a step further, emphasizing how he clearly had connections, these connections being roots deeply embedded in the agencies that operate outside the beautiful checks and balances created within our system.
Clearly had connections to the highest levels of American intelligence. He clearly had connections to
Who's this clear to? Do you mind making it just a little bit clearer to the brainwashed boomer watching Fox News? Because you guys do it. They're not making it over to the show. The millennial that used to believe in you left as well. So do you mind kind of sending this message to the boomer that just spoon feeds reality from Fox News? They might not see it as clearly as you do. Go ahead. Repeat that again.
To the highest levels of American clearly had connections to the highest levels of American intelligence. He clearly had connections to the highest levels of Israeli intelligence. In fact, one of the interesting things the Epstein saga reveals about, and I try to make this point, is one of the reasons why I'm always careful, and I say there are some elements within the Israeli government who don't like our peace process. There are a lot of elements within the
That is, hey, JD, don't want to be the first to tell you, but that is a Rode microphone in front of you. So tread lightly.
Israeli government that actually do like our peace process. They recognize that this indefinite campaign is not good for them either. And the Epstein thing is interesting because
it so is.
As much
you should tell that to the president. Man, I wish you had his ear. It's pretty interesting, ain't it?
As I know, Prime Minister Netanyahu, not a particularly popular person in the United States of America right now. Epstein seemed to be connected to the elements of the Israeli deep state that were left of center. Like, I've always found that fascinating.
Ooh.
It wasn't like he was super connected to the right of center of Israeli politics. America, he was connected across
the board. Oh, cool. I'm so glad you gave that kind of clarity. You don't want to protect our political system. It's all an Epstein sham, and they've all got their fingerprints all over it. But hey, the good guys, God's chosen people over here, half the faction was not involved. He may have been totally funded and operating centrally out of them. And that was like the core of his network. But it was only half of their government. All of our government, only half of their government. Hey, no big deal. As far as this goes, when the vice president can throw on a tinfoil hat and just pretend to be like one of you, come on, I'm part of the gang. I think something's goofy. Come on, gang, let's figure this out. Who's got the Scooby snacks? It becomes cruel, gaslighting. You've got crash outs across the internet because you can't have somebody like Ian Carroll, who is a polarizing figure. And I can't say I sit here and agree and believe everything the guy says, but you can't paint a guy like him out to be some internet buffoon. Then for the vice president of the United States to come in and confirm verbatim exactly that. So here, Ian Carroll did the legwork of splicing his episode with the JRE and JD Vance's, and how JD pretty much regurgitates ABC gum exactly all the points Ian Carroll does, and yet one, nowhere near the level of criticism, not being called an anti-guy, and also, kind of allowing the culpability to just totally escape while he does it. That being said, I'm not going to go through the whole clip. Got to be worried about getting flagged and stuff. But this was something that Ian Carroll had released this week as well, kind of doing the side-by-side of his episode versus JD's, and it's telling.
Vice President J.D. Vance just went on the Joe Rogan podcast and made some very choice admissions about Epstein and Israel. And it was just over a year ago that I went on Rogan and the world had a complete meltdown because it was the first time that someone had spoken candidly on such a big platform about Epstein and his ties to Israeli intelligence. But the vice president just came out a little over a year later and basically confirmed a whole bunch of what I said. Jeffrey Epstein was just an employee of these organized crime rings that work on behalf of like the CIA and Israeli Mossad and British intelligence.
Well, most people think he was Mossad.
Yeah, Mossad or CIA or some other deep state, whether in America or Israel or another country, or both.
So that when Jeffrey Epstein goes down, no one knows who he worked for.
Right.
He worked for intelligence, and I was told to leave him alone.
Right. Well, that was one of the things about the prosecutor was told that he was above their pay grade. I mean, it was one of the things that
he said he was like CIA or something.
Yeah.
Right?
He said I was told he was intelligence.
That's right.
When you really...
I don't want to go through his whole list. He's got 3 more points on top of it, but the point still stands. When you've got a side-by-side and the vice president is saying exactly what the town crier internet buffoon was saying, it really starts making you question who's the real buffoon here. So one of the things that we can't get lost in is how much JD Vance unravels in this interview. Yeah, we're pulling the veil off of the Jeffrey Epstein saga, and I'm with you guys. The guy was connected, and boy, I wish we could get to the bottom of it. But he continues to pull at that thread. He continues to highlight some nuances that I think the public tends to forget, doesn't get enough attention. And one of the bigger pieces he emphasizes is there's a separate conspiracy that just doesn't get enough attention. So let me, with my vice president platform, bring that attention. Cue the Ohio State University's backbone pervert, Les Wexner.
Separate conspiracy that hasn't gotten covered as much, which is
cover it, baby.
Epstein actually, okay. If you go back to the original Epstein guy was Les Wexner, okay, who Columbus, Ohio, was the wealthiest person in Ohio, maybe still is the wealthiest person in the state of Ohio. The thing that everybody in Columbus, I lived there for a time, knew about the Wexner-Epstein relationship is that Epstein was his tax guy. That Epstein was like the genius at identifying weird tax strategies that would allow you to not have to pay taxes, but if you were being a little skeptical, would also say that it would allow Epstein to either blackmail people or to have a separate nexus of influence and control and rich.
To further articulate that, Jeffrey Epstein was made... he was giving full autonomy over what Les Wexner's estate. And so being given power of attorney over his estate, Les Wexner is now poised in a position where he gets to have culpable deniability. He gets to say, whoa, I gave him power of attorney because I trusted him in being a trustworthy banker. And I didn't know he was doing all these creepy, terrible dealings with Victoria's Secret and the Trump's, Miss America pageant. So, where those lines get blurry, I wasn't there. And might I remind you, I wish I had the clip queued for this segment, but might I remind you, when Les Wexner testified in front of the congressional hearing probing the Jeffrey Epstein saga, his attorney, a Rothschild attorney, grabs him by the shirt and says, if you say another word, I'll kill you. That was the attorney on record in front of everybody. And we just march along like it's another Tuesday. Anyway, JD just wanted to give a little more context to the power and intermingling between Jeffrey Epstein and Ohio State and just the conglomerate state of Ohio. It's powerful billionaire.
Powerful people. And so I think there's an underreported, underexplored story of was Epstein like doing a lot of tax stuff that was not on the up and up, and is that one way in which he gained blackmail? It's not opposite of the sexual blackmail story, but in some ways it's you could imagine both things being true. I also just think there's an element of he was a scumbag, he was a very sick person, he built relationships with a lot of other rich and powerful people who just didn't have any real moral judgment about the fact the guy was obviously a scumbag. And again, to go back to
total unique opinion. Wow.
Defending Donald Trump. I know people don't want to hear this these days, but like, who was the guy? People say Donald Trump's blackmailed by Jeffrey Epstein. Who was the guy who narked on Epstein to the Palm Beach police? That's in the Epstein files.
Right.
It was Donald Trump.
He also kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago.
He kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago. It just, again,
well, it's obvious that Epstein was a sick man.
Yes, but if people want to say we mishandled the Epstein release, guilty. We did mishandle, especially the communications of it.
What do you think should have been done?
I think that we should have just dropped everything at the very beginning. And obviously it takes a little time to review the stuff, to find the stuff, to redact things where you have victims and so forth. But we should have just done it as quickly as possible.
But
it was just kind of a boo-boo. We should have just done it. That was kind of our big boo-boo. I'm curious if it's satisfying, like to the audience. Let me be Trump. We still talking about that? 850,000 kids in America disappear each year to never be found again. Those are those that don't get found. 850,000 a year. Out of 35 million, it's only a 35th. They won't notice. Are the milk cartons shopping menus, or just telling you guys, alerting you to the real problem? Because it only got worse. Even though through charitable efforts, it's only gained more funding. It's a problem that just keeps snowballing. Yeah, I just wish we had somebody that could get to the bottom of that. Anyway, I think JD Vance opens the drawer and pulls out the biggest smoking gun here, which is one that I personally have been exclaiming across the Rethink Tank shows as often as I can, which isn't often enough. We really don't talk about this enough, which is Trump's hand in the cookie jar. Do we have any pictures, real correspondence, anything that ties him to it directly? No, not quite. Some would say yet. Allegedly, who would know? But I would say this next piece that JD Vance puts a light on is probably the biggest smoking gun you could find or articulate. And again, JD Vance kind of glosses right over and never points out probably the biggest connection to Trump. But let me let JD make my point for me.
Back to 2007, 2008, the original Alex Acosta investigation of Jeffrey Epstein, where he basically dropped the federal charges. I think Epstein ended up getting prosecuted on some sort of local thing. But the original warrant, back in 2008, what was he looking for? What was he allowed to look for? What were they collecting? it was not looking at a broader conspiracy. From the 80s and 90s up to 2006, 2007, anything that existed that we didn't get back then was disappeared.
Man, we just wish we could have gotten something out of those investigations in like 2007, 2008. Boy, it would have been good. It's a name he raises throughout, just once or twice in the episode. But the person tied to that exact instance is Alexander Acosta. He was the prosecutor involved in that case that you've probably heard this term, but gave Jeffrey Epstein the notorious sweetheart deal, which in the field of law is like the most core-shaking deal ever seen. There hasn't ever really been a plea deal to this extreme, which was a plea that not only gave Jeffrey Epstein immunity, but also gave immunity to all co-conspirators, really put the kibosh to any justice or legal action happening in Florida arising out of this case, and further created a future protection, also freezing any investigation or inquiry into the network. So there's no getting around this bar with a RICO Act or anything else. All co-conspirators, unnamed and named, all get immunity. Brought to you by Alexander Acosta. The detail that J.D. Vance leaves out, which is the biggest nexus here, is Donald Trump appointed him into his cabinet. This was a guy, a part of the Trump administration. State Secretary of Labor confirmed April 2017. Look at this, just a couple of pals. That's a good little Nazi. Someone that knows how to take orders, shows up, gives a sweetheart deal, and then in return, not even a half a decade later, you get to be a part of the White House administration. Pretty great. And now you get to just ride off into the sunset because, nobody's throwing milkshakes at this guy on the street. He really doesn't even exist to the public eye. Here's a guy that is directly at the center. What did you do here? And in the few voices that have been able to kind of poke and prod and pry at this situation and press Alexander Acosta, I think we've only got like 2 interviews of it. Alexander Acosta literally says, hey, man, it's above my pay grade. I was just doing what I was told. What? What? We're going to let him do that? You go, hey, Bar Association, Florida Bar Association, we're going to do anything about this? And then you realize, all of the policing bodies are compromised, bought for, and a part of this. Ugh. Yeah, I guess you can't go to the bar to get culpability, but just recall a couple of pals and Trump, when he got pressed upon this, Trump likes to say, hey, I didn't know who I was bringing into my cabinet. I got taken advantage of. I was new to this whole thing, and if I got another chance at this, I'd do it better. I wouldn't pick creeps like this guy. And yet we got right back to it. First off, the people you appointed, Dan Bongino, Cash Patel, Pam Bondi, they all ran on your behalf saying, we're going to get to the bottom of this Epstein stuff. It's disgusting, and we need justice. Immediately to be like, nothing to see here, and 70% of your cabinet is quit. Cool stuff. I think you are on the right track. If I were to say I'm feeling represented, I'd be only telling the truth. Anyway, when you get pressed to this point, it's only justified to just feel the need to crash out. I'm not as good at it as some of the internet bests. So I'm going to leave it out to crash out expert Tim Dillon to really express the magnitude of emotion here.
This is the thing when J.D. Vance goes on Rogan and goes, well, they have this whole discussion about the Epstein docs, and J.D. is like, I'll go to my death believing it was a larger conspiracy. It's kind of like these guys are like, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? It's like, no, you're the vice president. What are you talking about? J.D. Vance is talking about this like he's a guy at a bar in the town I grew up in on Long Island, where he'd be like, I'll always believe it was a conspiracy. You sure? That guy owns a pool company. he's gonna be like, yeah, what are you gonna do? I'll always believe someone on there.
And we all know the play with this, right? The play is I'm trying to make distance between me and this current failed administration. I'm still going to be in bed with Peter Thiel. I'm still going to be a shill against your interests. However, for me to Trojan horse my way back into the White House, I really need to start creating a distance between me and Donald Trump, who is clearly compromised. So I got to make it seem like, yeah, I'm an outsider like you. Man, are you seeing this? This is crazy. I wish somebody could do something about it. Somebody should talk to him.
Is the vice president of the United States of America going on the biggest podcast in the world going, yup, I read all the files. Trump's innocent. Also, I'll always believe there was a greater conspiracy there. I'll always think something was going on. But what am I going to do? I'm the vice president. That's J.D. Vance's character arc right now. Is his whole entire thing is just telling people what the vice president can't do. Like, what about the war in Iran? He goes, there's not much I can do. I just kind of hang out and, watch as I'm part of the administration that betrays its voters and does the opposite of everything it said it was going to do. I just kind of hang out and, this Epstein thing, who knows? What are you going to do? It's a lot of what are you going to do energy from the vice president. I'm not saying the vice president is like an all-powerful figure, but it's just hilarious that, that's his argument.
Yeah, what are you going to do? Can I also remind you, it was reported on our show just maybe a month ago that a staffer caught Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance in the White House arguing about who's going to be taking the next appearance on Joe Rogan. And, the reason why that was relevant, we were reporting about, how Joe Rogan's fallen off. He's compromised and his voice has changed. It's just too clear. If you've been listening to a guy 3 hours a day, couple days a week over the course of over a decade, you really can tell when somebody shifts unnaturally. So when we were reporting that, one of the things that we were pointing out is as far as the J.D. Vance appearance goes, Joe Rogan used to pride himself on being this independent that hey, this is my show. I call the shots. You guys should let me do the future presidential debates because I'm just one of you guys. And this is my show. If I don't like you, you're out. And now we're learning, yeah, but for the sake of your influence and being a part of the club, you've got to let some intervention that's outside of the Joe Rogan control. So whose experience are we really getting? Is it like 80% Joe Rogan, 20% agency shill, or is it less or more than that? I don't know. Anywho.
What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? Yeah, these Epstein docs, isn't that nuts, Joe? You heard about that? What? You're the vice president of the United States. They keep trying to play this game where they're like this folksy,
you buying it?
Like relatable, yeah, these elites with the kids, they're stealing your money. What? Who? You are doing it.
It's you.
You're the ones who are doing it. And they're relying on the fact that some of their most ardent supporters, the ones who aren't directly being paid off, are the stupidest people in the world.
Can you say they're wrong?
That still works on them. They're like, yeah, Hillary Clinton. They're in the White House. They have the Congress.
But we need the SAVE Act because our elections are compromised. Ignore the other things I've shuffled into the bill.
They have the Senate. They have the Supreme Court. It is them. It is now them. I don't want to hear about the deep state anymore. You're playing me for a fool. You're playing everyone for a fool.
And it's working.
You brought in Kash Patel. You brought in that other guy, Dan Bongino. You threw him out or he left, whatever. You brought in Pam Bondi and then threw her out. I'm sick of hearing about this deep state. All of these people, you have to be one of the stupidest people in the world to fall for this shit at this point. You are peddling the dumbest, most, like, by the way, I hate to use this word, but cringe. It's literally cringe. You watch this and you go, I feel so disgusted by the fact that they think people are still going to believe this shit.
But to kind of craft that position even more, I think what's cringe is that it still has an effect. You know, Tim Dillon is around reasonable people. The fans of his show understand his perspective and in many ways agree. So how often is he being confronted with these facts or these folks that are blindly convicted, regardless, until CNN or Fox News tells me this is the case? I ain't believe it. Does not exist in my reality. I mean, this has been something that just kind of looms over our heads for years. Do I have to remind you that the Jeffrey Epstein thing became a part of the dialogue in 2015? The documentary on Hulu was 2016. Guys, this is 10 years later. Donald Trump. We still talking about that? Yeah, we're not going to stop until something happens. I'm going to go back a year ago. Like literally, here is Joe Rogan, July 24th, with his CIA handler, Mike Baker. And, you know, Joe, while he's a dog on a leash and is a shell of the inquisitor he used to be, you could see little inklings of him break out. And there's a couple moments in here I'm going to point out, but it's just interesting watching Joe kind of rebirth his awakening on these topics again, even when, you know, not long before this, you have to have Kash Patel on telling you there's nothing to see here. Trust me, let's move on. And you do nothing to press him. But I got to say, Joe Rogan's getting better at the pressing. That's a theme I saw in this JD Vance dialogue.
You know. But how does Pam Bondi say we have thousands of hours?
This is episode 2355, July 24th.
Of footage. And then Kash Patel says we don't have anything that you're looking for.
Yeah.
And then Tim Dillon said he has lunch with J.D. Vance, and J.D. Vance says that 10,000 hours is commercial pornography.
Right. Yeah. You think this freak show of Epstein wasn't like, it didn't have hidden.
Well, hey, remember, JD told you he's watched it all. I've seen all the I've gone through all the files. Well, JD, I bet you have 10,000 hours of it, more than enough.
Cameras, it wasn't taped and shit. I mean, come on.
So, 100%. Yeah. Well, that was the thing about that house they had in New York City, which is, by the way, for sale.
A $50 million house that was just gifted to him. Look the other way, please.
Sale. And,
oh, really?
Yeah, nobody wants to buy it. Like, you want to buy Epstein's house?
Do the cameras convey?
Well, this is the thing. I mean, you got to gut the walls. How are you going to know what the fuck is in there?
Yeah.
Imagine you're walking around your house naked and you think that the CIA is going, or you're not going to.
Look at this. Look at this. Watch him do it again. Joe Rogan calling out a CIA handler like, you're the CIA. You know,
you're freaking your organization. Around your house naked and you think that the CIA is, or you're freaking your organization.
Yeah,
or whoever it is.
To be fair, they just got a lot of hours of videotape of me walking around naked.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
But Mossad, whoever it is that was involved in this intelligence gathering, I mean, I'm just guessing. I have no idea. Yeah. But there's fucking pinhole cameras all over that house.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you have to start from that perception, right? Because again, if anything else, you're just being naive if you think, no, there's nothing. Again,
you got to take it down to the bare beams.
Yeah.
You're naive to think there's not something there, but jolly gee willikers, we don't know what it could be. Got no idea. Couldn't have a clue. Nowhere to begin. I wish we could get to the bottom of this.
Strip the wallboard off. You got to fucking every baseboard. You got to pull everything.
It's like we
fucking knows what's.
All right, so sorry for all the F-bombs that came at the end. Anyway, here's the bigger piece here. Joe Rogan is a cat that lets Kash Patel walk all over a dialogue with no press. He will look at Mike Baker and be like, there's something here. Let me push you now. You know, there's something here. JD Vance, yeah, there really is something here, isn't that? And when JD tries to escape, he reels him right back in. But then he will have Theo Vaughn pour his heart out, pandering for empathy, just being a human. Hey, I don't like the fact that it looks like our government's kind of compromised. There's a lot of scary, shifty stuff going on, and I am losing faith in the system. And Joe goes, you need to go for a run. You need to exercise more. It's your diet. He gaslights Theo Vaughn into ignoring all of his intuitions, raising everything he just let JD Vance exclaim. Everything he poured his heart out to Mike Baker on to his CIA handler, everything he's pouring his heart out over, he will gaslight Theo Vaughn into this is you, dude. You're kooky. You need to go for a run. You need to exercise more. You need to stop thinking about all this. It's crippling you. And yet Theo Vaughn, I think, is the most reflective of us. I mean, if any of us were in that space, I think we'd all be kind of sharing that same position of just like this. I feel disheartened. I feel a lack of confidence. And I don't know who to blame, how to fix this, where to start, who's on my side. So here's Theo Vaughn this past week, ironically on this past weekend, his show, interviewing Duncan Trussell, who also is kind of a shill within the system in the JRE network, but he is a bit of a thinker, and he comes up with a lot of great philosophies and points. So here's Theo Vaughn pressing Duncan Trussell on the morally compromised situation our political system is in, and what do we do about it?
Be mad that I got to sit with some of these guys and they act like there's no crime in their algorithms. They act like there's no like evil goals behind it.
Right.
And I think it's obvious that anybody can see where we're headed isn't a great place. So do you think some of these technocrats just don't have a moral compass? Because something must be wrong.
Oh, dude. I mean, that's a deep fucking rabbit hole. Like because you're talking about like the Galapagos Islands, right? Weird creatures there because they're separated from everything else, right? So when we're talking about the Silicon Valley tech overlords, we're talking about a weird kind of Galapagos Island where you've got this set group of people who've been there for a while, who have been engineering the technology that is now being used for mass surveillance, for blowing up Palestinians, for fucking exploding parts of the world, and for hypnotizing children into like being glued to the fucking technology, right? And so you're looking at like essentially a warlock's guild. These are the wizards of the world. They are summoning spirits via AI. A lot of them were into the occult. You can look that shit up. And regardless, I think there's public records of some of them saying that they used B.F. Skinner, the behaviorist's work. He was the guy who could make like pigeons tap dance and shit. They coded that into the algorithm, the same stuff they use for slot machines and stuff in Vegas.
Yes, I've seen that.
Right? So these are wizards, illusionists. So, dude, it's like, do they know what they're doing? Yes. They're making addictive technologies. Can they say that's what they were doing? Hell no.
So I'm sure on its surface you go, well, they're talking about technology. They're talking about the data centers. They're talking about the social media apps, the social network or the social dilemma. Sorry, that's what I was meaning to reference. Anyway, you've got all the, but zoom out. It's a much bigger network than you give it credit for. If you went down the rabbit hole of the Jeffrey Epstein files released by the DOJ, you would see that Jeffrey Epstein was highly involved in this. In fact, as much as this network of crooks loved compromising politicians and celebrities, Jeffrey Epstein's main target was scientists and technocrats because he knew where the power mechanism was. So it isn't just politics, celebrities, it's all one giant network. And they are moral. You have to be morally compromised to thrive in this world. So as we reflect upon all of the exposure that the vice president brought to us on one of the biggest internet platforms in the world, he ends these kind of dialogues with raising, doggone it, this was the one that I cared about the most. This was the big one. This just, what really grinded my gears? And thank God we got the vice president to get to the bottom of this one. What drove him nuts the most, And it wasn't the 850,000 kids that go missing every year to never be found. It's the way Joe Biden ate ice cream.
I think a lot of people, I've heard this argument, is this idea that Donald Trump,
was sort of. That's him shilling for Donald Trump. Let's. I want to share the ice cream one. That's a real keeper. Ice cream.
The way that he ate ice cream. I mean, it's like, we could bring some of this stuff up, but it's like they would get him eating ice cream in the most ridiculous, suggestive way imaginable.
What? What? I didn't know about this conspiracy. Oh, Obama in the back, creeping with the chocolate ice cream. We'll gobble it up. Oh, no. Okay. Oh, my. Yeah, cheers. I didn't realize that could be the big problem. But while that was kind of J.D. Vance's major focus, as you kind of got a little glimpse of there, throughout this whole exposure that he brought on the Joe Rogan Experience, it was a whole lot of shilling for Donald Trump, doing a lot of defense and protecting of the administration, their network. And while the whole conspiracy theory pandering play is to distance himself from this administration for future elections, he really did a darn good job of playing goalie for Donald J. Trump the entire episode.
I think a lot of people, I've heard this argument, is this idea that Donald Trump, was sort of, I've even heard people say he was blackmailed into this by the Israelis. Think that's not true, dude. It's just not true.
Can you understand, though, why people would come to that conclusion, especially because of the Epstein files?
What do you mean?
Well, the Epstein files were supposed to be released, and there was a tremendous amount of resistance.
So again, something that I've been critical of the last few months, year, got to give Joe his flowers as he doesn't let him just kind of slip through this one and continues to press the subject. And we're talking about the vice president here. And, of course it's a network, it's a relationship you want to preserve as best you can. But thank goodness we finally got a voice to push a little bit more.
Those files being released.
I see. So you're basically saying like the fear is that whatever's in the Epstein files was used to blackmail like the administration into doing the Iran thing.
Or at the very least, the people that were involved in the Epstein files that didn't want them coming out had undue influence.
Well, again, like say this with all candor, like we absolutely screwed up the comms of the Epstein files.
Oh, okay. Hey, just end it there. You got something there, but we screwed up the communications. Ironically, I have them right here. Yeah, because it wasn't like you started the first week of your administration by getting a bunch of God's chosen people, social media influencers, and gave them these tacky little binders. Let me get a angle where it isn't reflective. Declassified. I just added I changed the bottom here, the least transparent administration in history, because, I'll give you the answers more than they will. What was in the folder the whole time? It was Big Bird and whoa, Betty White. Oh, we found him. We always knew he was in there. Oh my God. Oh, who would have thought that? What were they sweeping more than chimneys? We know that wasn't there. But again, I'll give you the declassified files. Do you remember the charade? Then they look at you and go, why are you still talking about this? So yes, JD, you are very right in the fact that the way you handled this is what cooked the situation. But there ain't uncooking the cooked chicken. The situation is here. So the only way out, I would say, is true transparency, not gambling on America's stupidity and banking on the fact that they will just march forward and move on and forget the layers of idiocracy you are forcing me to try to accept. That being said, YouTube, I'm talking to you. Freedom of Information Act. This clip is 30 years old. It is featuring the President of the United States 30 years ago. I don't care whose broadcast this is. This is protected. It is not even a minute long. And this has nothing to do with nothing. It has nothing to do with the fact that JD Vance spent a majority of his podcast defending Donald Trump and trying to blur his relationship to this network and the curiosities surrounding his administration's relationship, cue Lutnick and the rest of them. Anywho, here is just a peculiar thing. Again, broadcast from 1991 has nothing to do with this episode, right? I don't know. You be the judge.
Trump's hideaway for tennis fugitive Monica Seles. Seles mysteriously disappeared after abruptly dropping out of the Wimbledon Championships 10 days ago, only to strangely resurface at Trump's palatial Florida estate. The mega developer reportedly invited the 17-year-old Yugoslav to stay at his home so she could avoid reporters trying to find out why she skipped the tournament. But why would Trump want to get involved in this? Could this eligible bachelor have met his match? The editor of Tennis Magazine could only guess.
Athletes,
mind you, that's one of the persons of interest in this story. There's another young girl as well.
Attract all kinds of people. Say, we have a term for them called jock sniffers, which the term, people who feel somewhat bigger by hanging around with athletes or celebrities, and I think it doesn't matter what social status you're from.
Trump has been known to be a big tennis fan. In fact, he found himself in some trouble last year when he was squiring Argentine tennis star Gabriela Sabatini around his casino in Atlantic City. She was 19 years old, underage, according to
squiring a 19-year-old in Atlantic City.
Jersey law. Trump was served with a fine.
Served with a fine because
Trump was Gabriela Sabatini around his casino in Atlantic City. She was 19 years old, underage, according to Jersey law.
Jersey law makes her underage, and anyway, allegedly has nothing to do with nothing. Definitely doesn't have a major nexus to this whole series of the vice president defending Donald Trump and making it clear. If anything, it was the Democrats' relationship. But do I have to take you back to the first clip where he said, listen, the right, the conservative faction of the Israeli state is innocent. It was the other half, but it was the entire Democrat and Republican system in America to blame. Guys, avoid goldfish syndrome for just a moment and try to retain and put some of these pieces together. Once you start doing it, it's compounding interest. The thing just builds on itself. Anywho, let's get to it. So here's where I'm at, okay? The issue isn't whether JD Vance privately believes there are powerful interests, institutional failures, or unanswered questions surrounding Jeffrey Epstein or any number of other controversies, because he pulled the veil right off from that inquiry for us. Millions of Americans believe that too. The issue is what happens when someone who occupies one of the highest offices in the country speaks like your neighbor to try to continue to lock down votes for a constituency it has no intention of representing. That's how confident they are in your stupidity, your goldfish syndrome, your inability to remember and connect the dots. There's a difference between saying, man, I think there's something wrong, and literally being in a position to find out what's wrong. I mean, you just admitted to watching 10,000 hours of... If you're asking the public to trust institutions, then accountability has to be more than a campaign slogan. And if you're telling the public those institutions have failed, then the people are naturally going to ask, what's being done to fix them? Whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent, that's the standard we should apply consistently to everyone in power. Everyone in power, regardless of your political team. Because public trust isn't rebuilt through podcasts. It's rebuilt through transparency, evidence, and accountability. You could fight with Marco Rubio all you want on who's going to take the slot on the JRE. But without real action, the people are no longer buying. If there are legitimate reasons information can't be released, explain them. If investigations are ongoing, say so, and let us be the judge. If mistakes were made, acknowledge them. But don't ask the public to indefinitely accept a world where every major controversy remains unresolved while everyone agrees something seems off. That is the quickest way to deepen cynicism. For years, Americans have been told to ignore their questions, then told their questions were valid, then told there was nothing anyone could do about them. Eventually, people stop believing the system is capable of policing itself. So here's where I'm at. If you seek power by promising accountability, then accountability has to follow. Not because every suspicion will prove true, and not because every theory deserves validation, but because confidence in a constitutional republic depends on the public believing that no one is above scrutiny and no institution is beyond question. At the end of the day, trust isn't something government gets to demand. It's something they have to earn. So with that being said, if we made you laugh or made you think today, be sure to hit that like button and hit the notification bell and subscription, because we're here each week. We've got live shows every Tuesday at 8 p.m. And check out our reactions channel, Rethink Actions. We're on Sunday mornings. Wake up, have a cup of coffee with us, and just have a break from the social and political chaos and just some laughs from the internet, the crazy internet videos. Between that and everything else, you can find all of our content, like shows like this, So Here's Where I'm At, and everything else in one central place, and that's at our website at www.rethinktankpodcast.com. Otherwise, guys, we appreciate you joining us, and we'll catch you next time. So here's where I'm at.